Female reproduction. Here we see the female reproductive tract. We see the ovaries. There's 2 ovaries, 2 fallopian tubes or oviducts, and the uterus sitting right there by the urinary bladder. Other components that the female must do, which is to provide nourishment for the offspring, are seen here in this real specimen. We have the ovaries, the fallopian tube, the uterus. Ovary is the main component of the female reproductive tract, and the ovarian hormones influence uterine secretions as well as the cervical secretions. So if we look at a little higher mag of the ovaries that we see, here's a real ovary here, fallopian tube, or fallopian tube in through here, and at the very end we have little fimbria, which surround around little finger-like projections that collect the egg and bring it into the infundibulum and into the uterine tube, which is really the fallopian tube, and then finally goes into the uterus. You got the myometrium, endometrium, cervix, and the vagina is what we'll be seeing. The main player here, of course, is the ovary, and the ovary has simple cuboidal epithelium on the outside. That's the germinal epithelium, as they would call it. It's not really germinal at all, but it's just a covering that goes around it, and that rips open every time ovulation occurs. Just underneath the germinal epithelium are a host of primordial germ cells, and then from primordial you go to a primary, which will have the flattened cells become cubes, and that can be multiple layer or single, and then finally you have a secondary follicle whenever you have an antrium located in through there. You see the cavities forming, and then the mature follicle. We have a big cavity here, and the egg is located here. When ovulation occurs with the LH surge, then these cells, the granulosa cells, become the granulosa lutein cells, and the theca internal cells become the theca lutein cells, and then if the corpus luteum regresses, it becomes a corpus albicans. So here we can see the different things, the germinal epithelium on the outside, as you see the tunica albuginea in through there, and the primordial follicles. These are primordial follicles here with the flattened nuclei. Once it become cube granulosa cells on the outside and the zona pellucida producing, then that is a primary follicle. So these are primordial follicles right here, and we can see a primordial follicle with the granulosa cells are flattened, but they become primary follicle when they become little cube cells with the zona pellucida producing, and that could be a single cell layer or a multiple cell layer. Here we see a single cell layer of primary follicle in the zona pellucida, and look at the granulosa cells actually contact the egg through the zona pellucida. This is the egg, the granulosa cells. This is the outside of the egg, and this is the zona pellucida. And then we can be multiple layers, and finally what happens is a cavity forms. A cavity forms in through there. That's a secondary follicle when a cavity is formed, and then cavity continues bigger and it becomes a mature follicle. So you go from a primary to a cavity to a mature follicle, and here we see some different layers. That's the corona radiata, which is the cell layer that is actually touching the zona pellucida, and then the cumulus oophrus is the kind of mountain around the egg in the follicle itself. So here's the corona radiata of granulosa cells around the egg, zona pellucida, and the egg and the nucleus that we see right there. In addition to the follicular fluid in the cavity, here we got the granulosa cells, and then we got a theca interna and a theca externa also there. So we see the nucleus, nucleolus, zona pellucida, cytoplasm, corona radiata, cumulus oophrus that we see there. primordial follicles, primary follicles. Primordial follicles right in through there, as we can see, and this is a mature follicle that we're looking at right there. Mature follicle, and you see the granulosa cells and the theca interna and externa developing there. Here's a monkey ovary. We can see some primordial follicles, but also some primary follicles developing, and some kind of in transition. Again, primary follicle. Secondary follicle, once you have this cavity develop, you see the zona pellucida and the egg inside there. So this is a mature one. If you have a wave of follicular development and they don't all make it, some become atritic. And anytime you see, this is darker fluid than we see here in the normal one, and also you see granulosa cells are actually into the fluid itself. That is indicative of atritic follicle. And atritic follicles, when it regresses totally, becomes these glassy membranes that you can see there, glassy membrane structure, as opposed to a corpus albicans, which is the final products of a corpus luteum. So here we see a corpus luteum right in through there, and a corpus albicans, which is the final product of that. Here's another one showing you a atritic follicle, as is actually making a glassy membrane. And here we can see the granulosa cells have luteinized to produce a corpus luteum that we see right in through there, and its first is corpus hemorrhagium in the beginning because it's bleeding in through there, and then you get the transformation of the cells. The theca cells are the ones out through here, but the granulosa lutein cells are the big ones in through there. The theca cells, they produce androgen, and then the granulosa lutein cells aromatize that to make estrogens, and progesterone is what they do. Progesterone is the main thing that they produce. Here you see the corpus luteum here and here. and here we can see corpus luteum with toluidinal blue show you the big nuclei, distinct nucleolus, lots of cytoplasm and lipid containing components, as you see in the corpus luteum, lots of vasculature. You can see a lot of smooth endoplasmic reticulum, tubular-like cristae in the mitochondria, and lots of mitochondria in through there, as well as some ER, and also some lipid. This lipid happened to be white in the blood vessel here, endothelial cells, collagens in through here. We see the nucleus of the granulosa cell, which is one of these guys. These guys are the same, the euchromatic nucleus. Corpus albicans is whenever the corpus luteum has regressed totally, it becomes a corpus albicans, a white scar type structure, corpus albicans, that we see here. And here we can see another one. So if you come from the ovary, you're going to go into the fallopian tube and finally into the uterus. And the fimbria of the fallopian tube, of the infundibulum, that surrounds the egg and coaches the egg into the lumen of the fallopian tube, have little fimbria type structures that project out on through there, and they are always coating, and they have ciliated cells that coats the fluid toward the oviduct. If you look at these, there are ciliated cells on the surface of connective tissue. There's blood vessels, but there also is lymphatics. Lymphatics in through there kind of help it hold it rigid and hold it open. So you can see lymphatics in there. Also, you can see that there are some true ciliated cells in there as well. So these in the fimbria, you have these projections that coat the egg into the oviduct, and in the oviduct itself, it's got all these cavities that are brought about by these little projections. You can see ciliated cells on not every cell, but pretty much a lot of the cells, and that's involved in moving the fluid to move the eggs down through the oviduct. And also this provides the environment for fertilization occur, which occurs in the oviduct. You can see the nice ciliated cells in through there, columnar epithelial cells. Again, you can see the ciliated cells. They're not every cell, but they're intermittent among some mucus-secreting cells. The fallopian tube is here. You can see the big lymphatics that run through there, but the epithelium and connective tissue that we see there. Eventually, as we get to the uterus, we see myometrium, perimetrium, and the endometrium. Endometrium is in through there. And here we can see the different structures. We can see the perimetrium, which we don't have in this particular case. The endometrium, the perimetrium being the outside, the connective tissue outside. Endometrium, and the endometrium could be the basal layer, which does not change that much with the cycle, and then the functional layer, which has a remarkable change. It sloughs off totally during menstruation. And here you can see where it's sloughing off at this point, but the basal layer is still there, and that's the source of the growth of the cells that occurred. And of course, the height of these and what functional status of the functionalis is dependent on hormones from the ovary. Also, we have these spiraling arteries, which are down in the basal layer but project up into the functional layer, and they provide nourishment for the developing secretory glands up through here. However, if corpus luteum is regressed, progesterone is not being produced, it will cause these spiraling arteries to retract and cause ischemia, and it's ischemia which kills these cells in through there. And here we can see one of those spiraling arteries. If you look at different profiles or the arteries in the basal layer, the spiraling arteries, that's what we see right in through there. More spiraling arteries that you see multiple cuts of the same thing, and you can see right here it's in the basal layer. There's a myometrium and the endometrium, the functional layer and the basal layer of the endometrium. Lots of smooth muscle associated with the myometrium. And then, so the hormonal concentrations being produced by the ovary is important. Of course, you've got the hypothalamus and pituitary producing FSH, which stimulates estrogen being produced. And so in the theca interna, you produce androgens, and then they are aromatized in the granulosa lutein, the granulosa cells, to estrogens. And estrogens stimulate proliferation of the glands, and then the progesterone with some estrogen as well stimulates the secretion of the glands. And then if a corpus luteum is not maintained, it will regress and produce a corpus albicans, and you have menstruation occurring again as part of a cycle. Here we see menses where the functional layer is being killed as it is ischemic. And then you have the recovery. The basal layer recovers again, and you have early proliferation. So this is early proliferation, and then the cells are increasing in number. You might see mitotic figures, and then late proliferation, again late proliferation, and then finally you get early secretory. If you get early secretory, you usually see lipid droplets, or these may be glycogen droplets that are below the nucleus. Late secretory, those droplets will be above the nucleus. So this is still early secretory, and then finally we get again early secretory. You can see the epithelium lining the surface. Actually, the epithelium lining the surface has ciliated cells, very similar to the oviduct. Late secretory, you can see lots of secretion in the glands that occurs. Also, we have the decidual reaction, and decidual cells are fibroblasts that change in their shape. They become more cuboidal, and they mark the limit where the fetus can't invade beyond that point in time. Decidual in that they're just there during pregnancy at the end. So you have implantation of the blastocyst. It attaches to the uterine wall and then becomes embedded in the endometrium itself. Placenta is developed right in through here. The connections, that's a nutritional connection to the uterus that will go through an umbilical cord to feed the baby. And here we see the myometrium, the endometrium, and this particular one has already got an invasion of a 10-day-old implantation. So ovaries produce the eggs. Eggs go in the fallopian tube. The fembria pull them in. Fertilization occurs. You get cleavage to occur, and while it's in the oviduct, it's enough time for the uterus to become secretory. It has need to be secretory before the egg is involved, and the ovulation is not ready yet. Here we see trophoblast cells, just some trophoblast cells. 273 shows you part of the placenta, and you can see that really the placenta is bathed with mother's blood. So there is some bleeding at parturition because mother's blood have open blood vessels when you pull away this. So we see the placenta here, and I'm not sure exactly where it is. I think it's right over through here. And this particular specimen plainly is right there in this specimen, which is attached to the fetus by the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord has two arteries as they come off after the branch from the aorta down the legs, and one vein returning is what we see. So that's the umbilical cord that we see. Remember, when we looked at connective tissue of different types, one of those type is a mucus type connective tissue, and that's what we have with the umbilical cord. Then from the uterus you come to the cervix, and cervix you have, on the outside of the cervix you have stratified squamous epithelium, but on the inside you have like simple columnar epithelium, and you have mucous glands which lubricate the cervix. And so here you can see some of the glandular secretions and some of the glands that you see there. You can see the secretions of the cervix there as well. And then as you come down through to the outside of the cervical os, it becomes stratified squamous epithelium. And from there we get into the vagina. Vagina has stratified squamous epithelium, just like, and you might note there's no mucus glands. So any fluid during a copulation comes from fluid exudates from the blood vessels. So you get fluid leaking out of the blood vessels to lubricate the vagina. And in the vagina you have stratified squamous epithelium, so you have basal cells, you have Purkinje cells, you have non-keratinized cornified layer on the outside. Here you can see those cells again, and as I mentioned to you before, in some species, in rats, you can collect these cells and be able to swab the vagina and be able to tell what kind of stages of a cycle that particular rat is in. Nourishment, protection of the offspring is also very important. Here we see the nipple with the sebaceous glands opening out through there, but also you have these lacrimal ducts that comes in through here, the lacrimal glands. Here's a pregnant individual. You can see where milk is being produced by these cells, and they should have myoid cells around them too, which squeezes the milk secretion. You see milk just forming here in this pregnancy. So overall, in terms of orchestration of the thing, you got the hypothalamus and the pituitary producing hormones which stimulate the ovaries to produce different hormones based on what high concentration of LH causes ovulation, but also it luteinizes the corpus luteum, which maintains a pregnancy if she is indeed pregnant. Also, we have the egg here, which has to be penetrated by the sperm, and you have different steps that are involved. You have the binding, the acrosome reaction, then the sperm goes through. Once it penetrates the plasma membrane, you have the cortical reaction that the egg has to prevent other sperm from coming through, and then you have pronuclei of each, and then they fuse together. So that's a female reproductive system with ovaries, fallopian tube, uterus, cervix, vagina, ovary being the main importance. And remember the different things that the female does. They produce gametes, and they actually have to transport sperm and ovum. Is what they do to provide the environment for fertilization, also an environment for implantation and placental developmental growth, nourishment and support of the offspring, and prenatal repetition if she doesn't become pregnant. More questions from the final exam. This is number 36. Which of the following process structure combinations in the urinary tract matches? Filtration, renal corpuscle? Yes. Absorption of protein, proximal tubule? Yes. Reabsorption of sugars, distal tubule? No. It's the proximal tubule. The answer is D. Evolutional changes in the kidney include insertion of a capillary tuft into the wall of a nephron? True. Adaptation in the brackish water? True. Development of long loop of Henle in brackish water? False. It was on land. The answer is D. Which characteristics facilitate maximum filtration of glomerulus? Large filter? Yes. Thin filter? Yes. High pressure created by the difference in the caliber of the afferent and efferent arterioles? Yes. Answer is E. 42. Which of the following hormones are produced by the ovary? Androgens? Yes. The theca interna producer, right? FSH? No. LH? No. None of these above is not answer. The answer is A. Which of the following follicles have primary oocytes? Primordial follicle? Yes. Primary follicle? Yes. Secondary follicle? Yes. All these have primary. Answer is E. Okay, meiosis occurs only during spermatogenesis, oogenesis, asexual reproduction. Answer is D. Which is true about spermatogenesis? It ends in spermiation. True. It requires FSH and testosterone. True. It produces stem cell spermatogony. True. Answer is E. Spermatogenesis differs from oogenesis in the presence or absence of the blood barrier. True. It's in the male, not in the female. Interrupted or continuous meiosis. True. Interrupted in the female, continuous in the male. A constant release of gametes due to the spermatogenic wave versus the cyclic release. True. In the male, it's a constant release of sperm somewhere in the tubules, and a cyclic release in the female. Which function matches that of the cornea? Least matches that of least. Protection, that matches, so that's not it. Structural support, it is a structural support layer. Filter out undesirable light rays, it does that too. Focus the image on the photoreceptor portions of the false. The lens does that. Cornea does all these functions. So the answer is the one at least is D. Okay, a serious eye disease resulting from obstruction of the outflow is phobia? No. Glaucoma? Yes. Uvula? No. Limbus? No. None of the above? No. It's B. Which is not true about the embryologic source of cells of the eye? Retinal develops from the brain cells, optic stalk. That is true. Lens developed from endoderm. That's false. It's from the ectoderm. Cornea developed from the ectoderm. That's true. The myoepithelium dilated muscle developed from the mesoderm. That is true. Myoepithelium comes from mesoderm. Pigmented epithelium in the posterior surface of the iris develops from the optic stalk. That's right. That's true too. Okay, the integrity of the relationship of the structural eye is predominantly maintained by structural support of the eye holding pressure. True. You got the wall of the eye holding pressure. Precise regulation of pressure via aqueous humor production outflow, true. If we don't have it properly, it's glaucoma or collapse eye. Bone structure of the sclera. In most species, is not a bony structure in the sclera. So the answer is D for most species. Owl does have that, but we're not talking about the owls in our session.